There is a tree that contains more vitamin C than oranges, more calcium than milk, more potassium than bananas, more iron than spinach, and more protein per gram than yogurt. Over 300 peer-reviewed studies have been published in medical and nutritional journals documenting what this single plant species can do inside the human body. It has been studied for its effects on chronic inflammation, blood sugar regulation, cholesterol, blood pressure, bacterial infection, liver damage, and tumor growth. You can grow it from a $4 packet of seeds on your back porch. So the question that should bother every American who has ever sat in a doctor's office is simple. Why has no one in the medical system ever spoken its name to you? The tree is called Moringa oleifera. In parts of Africa and South Asia, it has been called the drumstick tree. In the Philippines, it goes by malunggay. In the Indian subcontinent, it was called the miracle tree, not as a marketing phrase, but because no other single plant that ancient healers had access to could do what this one did, across so many conditions, with so few limitations. The reason it has never entered American medical practice has nothing to do with whether it works. It has everything to do with whether anyone can own it. To understand what moringa actually is, and why its absence from your medicine cabinet is not an accident, you have to start where most real knowledge starts, with history. Moringa has been used by human beings for at least 4,000 years. The earliest documented references appear in ancient Ayurvedic texts, where it was recorded as a treatment for over 300 conditions, from joint inflammation to digestive failure, to skin infections to malnutrition. This was not a minor footnote in traditional medicine. It was one of its foundational pillars. The Egyptians extracted oil from moringa seeds and used it for skin treatment, as a base for perfumes and as a preservative. Greek and Roman traders carried moringa oil across the Mediterranean alongside olive oil and saffron. In sub-Saharan Africa, moringa was planted beside villages as a permanent nutritional safety net. It grew fast, survived drought, produced edible leaves in every season, and treated common illness without requiring anything else. It was food, medicine, and water purification in a single living organism. No other plant in the pre-modern world filled that many roles at once. The nutritional profile of moringa leaves alone would be difficult to believe if it had not been confirmed by laboratory analysis repeatedly over the past 3 decades. Gram for gram, moringa leaves contain roughly 7 times the vitamin C of oranges, 4 times the calcium of milk, 3 times the potassium of bananas, 4 times the vitamin A of carrots, and twice the protein of yogurt. They contain all 9 essential amino acids, a characteristic almost unheard of in a single plant source, and one that places moringa in rare company, alongside quinoa and a small number of other complete plant proteins. The leaves are also rich in iron, magnesium, zinc, B vitamins, and a wide array of antioxidant compounds. A single tablespoon of dried moringa powder delivers a measurable percentage of the recommended daily intake of more than a dozen critical nutrients. And the leaves are only one part of the tree. Every component of moringa has documented use. The seed pods, the so-called drumsticks, are eaten as vegetables across much of South and Southeast Asia and remain a staple ingredient in soups, curries, and stews. The seeds themselves can purify water. Studies published in the early 2000s confirmed that crushed moringa seeds function as a natural coagulant, removing up to 99% of bacteria from contaminated water sources, a finding that aid organizations have since applied in developing regions where clean water infrastructure does not exist. The bark has been used traditionally for digestive ailments and gut inflammation. The flowers are brewed into teas for respiratory support and immune stimulation. Even the roots, applied carefully and in small amounts, carry a centuries-long history in anti-inflammatory practice. This was not a plant that served one narrow function. It was a full-spectrum resource, and every civilization that encountered it built part of its survival system around it. When modern Western science finally turned its attention toward moringa in a serious way, beginning in the 1980s and accelerating through the 2000s, what researchers found was not a folk remedy in need of correction. It was a folk remedy in need of recognition. Studies conducted across universities and research institutions in India, Nigeria, Japan, South Korea, Pakistan, Thailand, and the United States identified a broad range of bioactive compounds in moringa tissues. These include isothiocyanates, flavonoids, quercetin, beta-sitosterol, chlorogenic acid, and a particularly potent glucosinolate-derived compound called moringin. In controlled studies, these compounds demonstrated measurable anti-inflammatory effects, antioxidant capacity exceeding that of most commonly consumed fruits and vegetables, blood glucose lowering activity relevant to type 2 diabetes, and improvements in lipid profiles directly connected to cardiovascular risk. A comprehensive review published in 2014 in the journal Phytotherapy Research compiled results from over 100 individual studies and concluded that Moringa oleifera showed significant therapeutic potential across multiple categories of human disease. The evidence base is not thin. It is enormous, and it continues to grow with every passing year. So the science is real, the history is deep, the nutrition is extraordinary, and the tree is remarkably easy to grow. A $4 packet of seeds, a sunny window, and a few weeks of patience is all it takes to get started, which is precisely what makes the next part of this story so important to understand. With all of this evidence on the table, the question is not whether moringa works. The question is why the American medical system has never acknowledged it. And the answer is not complicated. It is structural. It is financial. And it comes down to one word: patents. A pharmaceutical company cannot patent a leaf. It cannot patent a tree that has been used by billions of people across thousands of years. It cannot claim exclusive ownership over a compound that grows freely in nature on every inhabited continent. And without a patent, the entire pharmaceutical business model collapses. There is no exclusivity. There is no controlled pricing. There is no protected revenue stream. The FDA approval process for a new drug costs between $1 and $3 billion. No company will spend that proving a plant works if the result is something anyone can grow in their backyard for free. The return on investment does not exist, and so the studies stay buried in journals. The data stays overseas, and the tree stays invisible to every American who depends on a doctor for health guidance. But the pharmaceutical industry did not simply ignore moringa. It tried to find a way around the problem. Over the past 2 decades, multiple patent filings have surfaced in international databases, attempting to claim ownership of specific moringa-derived extracts, proprietary concentration methods, and synthetic delivery systems. The strategy is always the same: isolate one compound from the leaf, modify it just enough to qualify as novel, push it through a regulatory process no independent grower could ever afford, then sell it back to you at a price only patent protection allows. The problem, as multiple studies have suggested, is that moringa appears to work best as a whole plant. The synergy between its dozens of active compounds may be more effective than any single isolated molecule. And that fact that the unprocessed leaf outperforms the patented extract is not merely a scientific observation. It is a commercial threat to a system that depends on complexity to justify its cost. This pattern is not unique to moringa. It is the same structural logic that kept turmeric on the margins for decades, that dismissed elderberry as folklore, that ignored the anti-inflammatory properties of ginger until supplement companies found a way to bottle it and mark it up 300%. The American medical framework is not built to evaluate trees. It is built to evaluate products. And when the most effective version of a remedy is the one that cannot be turned into a product, the system does not adapt. It looks the other way. What the system cannot evaluate, it will not recommend. What it does not recommend, the public never hears about. And what the public never hears about, it can never choose. Meanwhile, the Americans most affected by this structural blind spot are the ones paying the most. Adults over 65 take an average of 4 to 5 prescription medications per day. Annual out-of-pocket pharmaceutical spending in the United States now exceeds $1,400 per person. The leading categories of that spending are drugs for chronic inflammation, blood sugar control, cholesterol management, and blood pressure regulation. These are the exact categories in which moringa has shown confirmed, peer-reviewed, and repeatedly validated effects. No responsible person would suggest discarding a prescription. But the fact that a tree costing less than a fast food meal to plant at home, addressing the same conditions that drain American households of thousands of dollars each year, has never once been mentioned in a clinical setting, should raise questions that do not go away. Quietly, growing moringa at home requires very little. In USDA hardiness zones 9 and 10, which cover most of Florida, southern Texas, the Gulf Coast, southern Arizona, and much of southern California, moringa can be planted directly in the ground in full sun. It prefers well-drained sandy or loamy soil and needs minimal watering once established. Growth is aggressive. A moringa tree can reach 10 to 15 feet in its first year. In cooler climates, it thrives in large containers placed outdoors during warm months and brought inside before the first frost. Leaves can be harvested continuously throughout the season. They can be eaten fresh, added to cooked meals, dried at low temperatures and ground into a fine powder that stores for months, or steeped as a simple tea. A single healthy tree can produce several hundred pounds of leaves over a growing season. The startup cost is a few dollars. The ongoing cost is effectively nothing. For generations of Americans, this kind of self-reliance was ordinary. People grew what they could. They kept kitchen gardens and a few fruit trees in the yard. They preserved food through the winter. They did not wait for a system to tell them what was safe or what was worthwhile. They observed, they planted, and they passed what they knew to their children. Moringa fits squarely inside that tradition. It does not require an ideology or a movement. It requires a pot, a handful of seeds, and the willingness to take seriously something the system has decided is not worth mentioning. Moringa oleifera is not a miracle, and calling it one is the fastest way to see it dismissed. What it is, precisely, is one of the most thoroughly studied, historically validated, and nutritionally complete plants ever identified. It costs almost nothing. It grows almost anywhere, and it quietly addresses a range of conditions that millions of Americans currently manage through a system engineered to keep them purchasing what they could be growing. 300 published studies did not make moringa famous. They made it inconvenient. And in the American medical economy, inconvenient knowledge is not suppressed with force. It is simply never mentioned at all. That silence is not an oversight. It is a price structure. And the people paying that price are the ones who were never told they had a choice.